Hello everyone, this is your host Wesor, and welcome back to another episode of Talking the Red. I know it's been a while since I've made a couple of these videos, but what better time to get back into it than one of the most anticipated fights of patch 5.2. This is going to be the extreme version of Ruby Weapon, also known as Cinder Drift. So this fight is a lot of fun with plenty of movement, and the DPS check is honestly not too bad. So if you are a new player or have simply been waiting to get into Extreme and Savage raiding, this is a really good fight to kind of introduce you to the changes between normal and Savage, get you used to the top end raiding. As always, these episodes of Talking the Red are kind of focused on just the mechanical outlook of playing Red Mage. This is not the absolute high end. I think I finished somewhere around 70th percentile for this run, but hopefully gives you kind of an idea of how to play Red Mage if you're new to the class and get you used to the mechanics for individual fights. Obviously, if you're top end Savage, you probably don't need one of these videos. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get started in here. So we go ahead and get started with our countdown. This fight is very front-loaded. If you can make it past the first couple of mechanics, you will honestly be pretty set for this first phase. This group that I was in, we were farming it most of the night, just a random party finder group, and we did really, really well, so I'm pretty happy with it. So we go ahead and get started here with our pre-casting. I'm still using an augmented Deep Shadow weapon and Grey 2 tinctures, so you could probably afford to go a little bit higher if you did Hades and whatnot. So our first mechanic is going to involve a lot of dodging. Go ahead and get started here with our modification. And you're going to have these Magitech bits that spawn, and this is probably one of the trickiest parts for party finder groups to figure out. You basically have to bait the line AoE from these Magitech bits away from the spiraling AoEs that are about ready to come out. As you can see here, I accidentally clipped a couple of my casts, which definitely did hurt a little bit. Hopefully further runs we won't have to worry about that. But as you can see, you basically have to figure out where these AoEs are going to be spiraling out to. There is a very, very small safe zone right next to the leftmost AoE that you're closest to. So if you can get up there and get in that little safe zone, you've pretty much got it set. And that's really the hardest mechanic of this first phase. If you can get past that, you're pretty set. There is one more section here in a little bit that does get pretty tricky, and we'll talk about that here in just a second. So here we go, finish up one of our combos there, and pretty liberal with getting my mana back, so I'm not afraid to pop that. So FlexiClaw here, there's a couple of different ways the groups do it. Our group did not rotate, but for groups that have pretty even ranged in melee, typically melee do not want to be on the long crack right there. So sometimes your groups might ask you to rotate clockwise to have you ranged on one of the longer cracks there. We don't have to worry about it for this first part because, as you can see, we're getting used to these bombs right here. You do have to pay attention whether or not he's doing liquefaction or the other one. I can't remember the name of it. And that'll kind of determine where you need to be. You'll see the liquefaction here in just a little bit for the second part. And then here in just a little bit, we're going to start getting used to the heliocopter here. So for Red Mages, it's not too bad. This is a very healer-intensive fight. We did wipe a few times getting used to some of these phases, and honestly, there's just some parts where you just have to have a decent healer. As ranged, it's honestly a fairly simple fight. You just kind of stand in one section and dodge a little bit and you're ready to go, but there's so much AoE damage going out that it can be pretty tricky. Now here's the Raven's Flight. This is the other really tricky mechanic. He's going to be dodging around, so you have to make sure and get to the safe spot of the zone here. You can see he has a big claw, so you have to figure out which side is going to be safe. A lot of groups have problems with the second part where he puts out those claws and you have to figure out which side is going to be the safest right then. As you can see, our safe spot was the right side, so once you see which arrow is facing the center of the arena, it's pretty easy to make sure to just get over to that side. But there is a lot going on. It is a very scary looking mechanic, but if you kind of slow down and just pay attention, you can really take your time and see where the arrows are pointing and get to your safe zone in time. So here we're going to split into two different groups. each taking one of these meteors right here, and he's going to be doing his big frontal cone right there too. And then just like Leviathan Savage, we have to get over to the side, almost kind of like Black Smokers almost, and he's going to be doing a big lion cone right there through the middle. And it lines up just perfectly so I can get right back to him and get into my next combo right here. I'm not using displacement so much, just because there's so much AoE going on and so many different markers out and about. I try sticking pretty close to the rest of the group just for the sake of healing more than anything else. But if you are comfortable doing displacement, you can definitely do that. So we're about ready to get into the next Flexiclaws right here, and trying to find my marker there. I'm on D. And for this one, this is the one where we have to actually stand on the cracks, and it does get really, really crowded. As you can see, I overloaded on one side of my mana here, so my DPS is going to be hurting just a little bit. It can be very intimidating being on one of these short ones, but trust me, you do have enough room to drop these bombs and still get around as quickly as possible. As you can see, I had to adjust a little bit for the ninja. It gets really, really tight right there. I think that's probably the tightest that we had out of all of our runs trying to do this. But thankfully, before the next mechanic, the big ruby beam right there, they do fade away. So just plant yourself right underneath them, and you should be able to escape any kind of permanent damage and avoid setting off the bombs. And get into our next combo here, and as you can see, I mean, the fight's almost over. Once we get him down, I think sub 5%, he does start getting into his phase where he just casts Ultima right there. That's his soft, well, hardened rage in this case. He just casts it automatically after a certain percent, so if you're able to get him down, I mean, we skipped a couple of mechanics there because the DPS was high enough. If you can get him down fast enough, you're not going to have to worry about that. Now, for this next phase, we did not actually wall this. You're going to notice a ring around the edge of the arena there. If you do touch it, you do die in the second phase. A lot of groups will reset the fight because it is a check mark, so you can just start fresh if you want to. We decided not to do it. Our DPS was high enough that we just decided to go right to it. So we have Nail popping out right here. And for those that haven't been keeping up to date with the patch notes and everything, Red Mage did get a pretty decent little buff. It's not a huge amount, but it does line us up a little bit closer to the rest of the ranged casters out there. So it's pretty easy if you're doing well and your gear is up to date to be doing upper 13s, 14k, which is really, really nice. Like I said, it does put us in line with some of the other casters out there. It was desperately needed. So once again, the first phase is the first mechanic is really the hardest thing here. We have to find our ads and start going right to them. So that's that negative persona right there. You have to look at the color of your debuff and then start attacking the opposite colored creature. Now for Red Mage, we do have these AoEs popping off on us quite a bit, and I think I did get the next mechanic here on most of my runs. I don't know if it specifically targets ranged or what. We got Lunar Dynamo, so you have to get in pretty closely. But yeah, that tether right there is a face that we have to drag into our mob. Now, both of these ads do cast different things sometimes, so you really have to pay attention to the cast bar. There's no marker or anything like that. And for the sake of ease and where they're tanking it, we found that it was a little bit easier to move to the north when you're trying to avoid the stuff like the Lunar Dynamo or the other circular attack. It is possible that if they are both casting different moves, that if you're not placed well, you might avoid the move from your ad, but get clipped by the move from the other ad. So you do have to be very, very careful there. And that's really the hardest part of the fight, to be honest. Everything else after this is pretty easy. Don't forget the eye there, that's negative aura. It does have a cast bar, so you can just turn around once the cast bar is done. Now this next section we're going to be dropping meteors. Pretty standard meteor mechanic. There's going to be a number of flames above our head, which indicates the drop order. We just go to our suggested marker and drop it there. Now, whoever does have marker 8 is going to have to drop theirs a little bit closer to the boss, and you'll see why here in just a second. If you do have a chance, this fight is pretty cool if you're big into the lore of Final Fantasy XIV. You can see Dalamud the Moon dropping in the background. I didn't get a really good shot of it during our run because I'm just kind of face downward the whole time. But it is a really, really cool graphic going on in the skybox. So there you can see number 8 just right to our right, dropping it about halfway between us and the wall. That is going to be our safe spot for this meteor drop. Now that Screech right there that she's casting does push us back, so don't run behind it. Just go ahead and stand close to her and position yourself so she'll knock you back into the safe zone. And that's really the hardest part about that. Compared to the ads, it's a very, very simple mechanic. And from this point, pretty standard stuff. We've got a couple comets right here that the tanks are going to have to take, just like Ultima Seraph and Orban. We did designate a tank to kill first. If your group is pretty solid, then you don't really have to. They die fairly quickly, but sometimes a tank might be able to use an invulnerability, and you just want to focus down on the other one just for the sake of it. Depends on who has the best health, how your healers are doing and whatnot. Our healers this run were very, very good. We didn't really have to worry about too many mechanics. Most of this fight is stuff like this, the Onslaught, and it's just raid-wide massive AoE going out every few seconds or so. If you can get decent healers in, then as a red mage, you're really not doing too much, just kind of going ham on DPS the entire time and not really worrying about it. And there you have it. I mean, that's really the fight. As you can see, we forgot to pop our LB3 for that. But there you have it. That's Ruby Weapon EX. Like I said, very, very simple fight. Very good learning fight if you were interested in extremes at all. Hopefully, I will be able to jump into some Savages a little bit later. That will scale up the difficulty quite a bit. But depending on the schedule, we'll just have to see how that goes. Anyway, hope you enjoyed this, and I will see you guys next episode.